Friends, the Lord be with you. It is my joy and honor and privilege to welcome you to the third annual Founders Day Lecture here at Western Theological Seminary. This Founders Day Lecture is designed to be a time where we reflect on a specific time or period or initiative or project in our seminary's history in order to draw wisdom for the present and strength for the future. It is a time in which we pause and lift up our eyes to the Lord and give thanks and praise for His providential care for this institution for 158 years. This year's lecture will be given by Dr. Vern and Carla Sterk. The title of the lecture is The Western Theological Seminary Legacy in Chiapas, Mexico. In a moment, I will say a few brief words of introduction, but before I do that, Vern and Carla have also invited a few others to join them in giving this lecture today. They are J. Samuel Hofman, class of 1958, Jim Heneveld, class of 1981, Reverend Janelle López-Koolhaas, class of 2001, and President Emeritus, Reverend Dr. Dennis Voskuil. Friends, thank you so much for being here today. Vern and Carla began a long and fruitful career as missionaries in Chiapas, Mexico, immediately after Vern's graduation from Western in 1968. During this time of service as missionaries, Vern also began his studies at Fuller Theological Seminary's School of World Mission and continued to work on his degree during each home assignment and eventually receive his PhD in Intercultural Studies from Fuller in 1992. From the very beginning of their ministry, Vern and Carla have always worked closely in partnership with one another. Their long and fruitful service in Chiapas is full of noteworthy achievements, which I hope we will hear about today. Western first asked Vern and Carla to come and join us to teach an evening course at the seminary in 1983. And then in 1997, the seminary asked them to be teachers in residence for one semester to help us by teaching courses in missiology and evangelism. This relationship continued over the next 8 years. One semester, the Sterks would be teaching in residence at Western, while the remainder of their time would be spent in Chiapas, continuing their work there. They also assisted the seminary throughout this period by leading intercultural immersion trips for Western students each January in Chiapas. And Dennis, I'm jealous and envious that you got to go on 8 of them in a row, 9 of them in a row. 9 of them. I'm at 0. Finally, in 2005, the Sterk's full-time work in Chiapas came to its conclusion, and the seminary invited Vern to a full-time appointment as the Richard Alderslice Chair in Missiology and Evangelism. Vern and Carla brought a wealth of experience in cross-cultural ministries to the seminary and have helped to equip a whole generation of students, both for global mission and for cross-cultural mission and evangelism in the U.S. as well. They taught various courses in the seminary's Master of Theology program and serve as warm and pastoral advisors and mentors to many students at Western who come from different cultural settings. Their passion for the gospel, their deep concern for the poor, the downtrodden, and the forgotten, as well as their commitment to spreading the good news of the gospel was infectious within the seminary. Let me share 2 brief testimonies about Vern and Carla. First, Vern published a book in 2019 titled Surviving Persecution: How to Understand, Prepare, and Respond. It is a study based on more than 40 years of living in and working with the Mayans of Chiapas, and is a guide for Christians living in a hostile environment to know how to avoid unnecessary persecution and to survive violent persecution when it strikes. Vern and Carla brought several copies of this book, so if you would like to get a copy, please, to purchase a copy, please speak to them. I want to read from the foreword of the book written by Dr. Chuck Van Engen. He said, "This book is a must-read for Christian leaders on all 6 continents who want to guide the church and its members toward a vibrant, healthy, impactful, and transforming presence in their local and global contexts, in spite of the persecution they suffer. The other testimony I want to share is from one of Vern and Carla's students, Rick and Stephanie Peterson, who are currently serving with RCA Global Mission in the Netherlands. They said, while at Western Theological Seminary, Vern and Carla Sterk were our exemplars of missional lives, run at a marathon pace for decades with the better country of Hebrews fixed firmly in their sights. Over our own past 20 years of mission, we have drawn on their wisdom accumulated over years of service that few other people could provide. When we had questions about navigating tensions between government and local rebels while maintaining the witness of Christ and keeping ourselves safe, who else could we consult? We are so grateful to them. Vern and Carla, in recognition of your faithful service, love for the triune God, sacrificial commitment for God's people, and passion for the gospel, on this day, April 18, 2024, we are establishing the Vern and Carla Sterk Scholarship for Intercultural Ministry and Missiological Promise. An award given each year to a student who best exudes and embodies the commitments, passions, and values of Vern and Carla Sterk. Friends, would you join me once again in welcoming Vern and Carla to the podium?
Wow, let me say first that I've never had an introduction like that, and kind of surprised me to hear all of those amazing things, because God just blessed us with a kind of ministry and I would call legacy that came from Western Theological Seminary. And I just want to share a few things about how I see that Western has established an impressive, not only legacy for us, for Carla and for me, but for all of those who are going to share today, and many other missionaries who went to Chiapas and who served the Lord there. And so I want to highlight today how the legacy of Western Theological Seminary has really impacted all of us. And I want to refer to that by just looking at this amazing list. This is an incredible list of missionaries, and they're all graduates of Western Theological Seminary. And I think that's the basis of what I want to talk about today in the few minutes that I have here, because you will hear from 5 of us today that will share about Western's legacy in Chiapas. And I'm happy to be the first one to share my personal story and perspective on this legacy. It's because it's remarkable when I reflect back of how I ended up being a missionary in Chiapas. Western guided me to become a missionary even before that process started. When I graduated from Hope College, Western helped me get an interchange to attend my first year at Austin Presbyterian Seminary in Texas. And when I was there, my roommate was Daniel Garcia. And he'd take me down to visit his family in Mexico, and that started my appreciation and love for Mexican culture and for the Mexican people. As God would have it turn out, when I returned to Western in my middle year, Beth Marcus showed up at the seminary one day, and Beth Marcus was the director of North American Mission at that time. And she came looking for somebody who would volunteer to be on an internship to Chiapas, Mexico. Well, my roommate had gotten me interested in Mexico, but I'd never heard of Chiapas. And Beth Marcus worked it out with the seminary, and we went 1 month after I married Carla, we flew to Chiapas. And so we had our kind of extended honeymoon there. And in that time, Carla and I lived with the Tseltal indigenous Christians. And we fell in love with those people. And that's what really drew us back to Chiapas, because following that internship, God used that to give us an invitation from the Chiapas mission at that time. They gave us an invitation before I even started my senior year and was looking for a call. I got one from Chiapas, and you can't live much better than that. And Carla and I then planned and looked forward to going to Chiapas, but Western did one other kind of unthinkable thing for me at that time. They offered to do, because John Pete was here, he was a missionary to India. John Pete was here, and he directed us in what they called the individual study program. And he led me on 2 individual study subjects in missiology. And so that was, all of that was just amazing to us. But my point here is that Western Theological Seminary had a very clear role in guiding Carla and me to become missionaries in Chiapas. That started it. After that, graduating from Western Seminary in 1968, we were called to an unreached and resistant tribal area in Chiapas. God led us on an incredible and challenging adventure. It started in village living, which was pretty rugged, with Carla having to do all the diapers on the rocks. But God used all of that to introduce us to this challenging adventure in an animistic culture where we could hear the chants of tribal shamans all around us, animal sacrifices to the ancestral deities. And after the socio people in the village asked us to help them with some simple medications, God opened up for us a door into medical and healing ministry. Through this ministry, God amazed us with a few first believers, and that sparked a movement in house churches. And as that gospel spread, those same Christians suffered persecution. Persecution that challenged them with severe opposition, but also threatened us a few times. We were only shot at twice. Violent persecution was what followed those Christians for the next 25 years. And the persecution was so severe that that's what I ended up writing my PhD and book on surviving persecution. But as the social churches grew, we were amazed at the need for leadership training. And that's what we were assigned to, and so we had to move out of the tribal area and move to San Cristobal, is a city in the tribal center, and start a Bible school. And as we did that, we were amazed by the number of students that showed up in the Bible school. But then Bible translation came next. And the socio leaders asked us to help translate the first full socio Bible in their language. It was a demanding 10-year project. We worked almost day and night, but we had talented indigenous translators work with us. And the Roman Catholic bishop of our area even became interested in the project and assigned 2 catechists to work with us. That led to something that was never done before in Mexico, and that was the first interconfessional Bible translation ever done in Mexico. I had to return to Western Seminary before we had that project going. because I needed to brush up on my Travis on my Hebrew. And who knew that that Hebrew, at least seminary Hebrew, would ever be useful in what we were going to do? I was thankful for the Bible translation being finished after 10 years, and we were excited to see that over 5,000 Bibles were sold in that very first day of the Bible dedication. In every stage of our ministry in Chiapas, we had an adventure that was founded and cared for by the historical and theological foundations given to us at Western Theological Seminary. Today we celebrate the seminary's rich and long-lasting legacy in Chiapas. God has used graduates of this seminary to bring about thousands of Tzotzils to Christ, and counting all of the language groups and tribal areas and Spanish, and all the denominations that now work in Chiapas, there are now more than 1 million followers of Christ who have followed that legacy. What an awesome legacy. Isn't that amazing? And allow me to close with the definition of legacy after all this. A long-lasting impact that will live on for generations to come. That's the legacy of Western Seminary in Chiapas. I challenge the Western Theological Seminary leadership, Felix, faculty, and others to continue this strong legacy by inspiring your students to think of going into all the world, not just serve in the United States, but as I heard Blaine Newhouse in chapel this morning, to go into places like Bahrain, to go into all the world and share the gospel with those who are waiting for that wonderful message of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So be it.
I wish Paul Meyerink could participate in this today, because he could express his gratitude for Dr. Kuiper's classes in Hebrew and Dr. Outerslice's classes in Greek, because Paul Meyerink majored in translation, Bible translation. However, for me, the most helpful part of Western Seminary education was vocal music. Many of us students had enjoyed vocal music in our college years, and we continued that here at Western Seminary. We formed a choir of 24 voices with Nevin Webster as our director, and we even planned a choir tour during spring vacation, singing in churches in Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa. We also had a weekly radio program on station WJBL under the leadership of Dick Vandervoot and Ray DeVries. Ray DeVries had musical talent, great musical talent on the piano and the organ. And the program was called Moments of Melody. And it had great music, including a duet by the Lehman brothers, Earl and Gordon. It was good preparation because our first assignment in Chiapas was vocal music. And that assignment lasted for 40 years. We were to join the Meyerinks in Chiapas, but when we arrived, they were in the United States on their first furlough. So the Wycliffe Bible translator Mariana Slocum flew with us into the remote Seltal Hills, and she introduced us to the mother church in a small valley called Corralito. Mariana and her partner, Nurse Florence Gerdell, had spent 10 years there. Mariana had completed the New Testament translation, and she had introduced the Seltals to vocal music. The Seltals had no songs in their language, And so Mariana put Celtal words to American tune hymns. And she had a poetic gift, and the Celtals loved her songs. Mariana and Florence had moved on to the lowland part of the tribe to produce a New Testament in their dialect, and she continued to create new hymns. So she gave us the assignment of teaching the new hymns to the Corralito choir and the choirs of a half dozen nearby congregations. We were to teach two-part harmony, Helen teaching the melody to the women and I teaching the alto to the men. However, one day in a rehearsal with the Corralito choir, I was not sure of the alto part, and I was following it in an American hymnal. And one of the men asked, "What is that? How does that help you?" And I explained that the row of dots on the top was the melody that Helen was teaching the women, and that the dots underneath was the lower part that I was teaching them, and that the words underneath were from our language and connected to the notes. And then he said, and what's underneath those words? And I thought, uh-oh, I'm about to double our assignment. But I admitted to him that I was really teaching them what was meant for women with low voices, and that, yes, there were notes for men with high voices and low voices. And he said, "So there are 4 parts to all the songs?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, then teach it to us." So from then on, the Celtals sang in 4-part harmony. And to help ourselves, we obtained special Gestetner equipment so that we could create sheet music for the choirs. With special pens, I could put all the lines and the notes on a stencil and type in the Celtal words and then mimeograph copies. And Mariana kept sending us new hymns, and eventually the hymnal included 324 hymns. Our main assignment with the Meyerinks was to establish a Bible school for the Celtals. And the Lord gave us an attractive ranch named Buenos Aires on the eastern edge of the tribe. It had a large ranch house and an airstrip for the MAF airplanes, so we had communication and supply. It also had building materials, stones on the hillside for foundations. The stones were all limestone, which we could burn in an oven to produce lime, that we could mix with sand from the river for mortar and plaster. And then there was a hill of dirt with a good mixture of clay and sand for making bricks. And there were tall pine trees for lumber, and that required men skilled with axes and a 7-foot 2-man ripsaw. But what followed was 20 years of construction. Mexican bricklayers would put up the walls, and we would add the roofs. The first house we built was our own home, and then housing for the students and their families, housing for Paul's 2 translation helpers, a chapel and classroom building, a school kitchen and dining room, a literature building. With the Meyerinks and Henevelds, we developed a variety of courses for church leaders, their wives, and their children, also a Christian education for young men and young women. Vocal music classes were always a popular part. And another class I taught was church history. I looked for a simple English textbook on the spread of Christianity to translate, and I couldn't find one. So I had to create one in Celtal. After 23 years at the Celtal Bible School, we moved south to the Toholabal tribe. There also, the Wycliffe missionary had completed a New Testament and a hymnal with 70 hymns. Vocal music again became our first assignment. In a lowland village, there was a young man with a poetic gift, and he put Toholabal words to tunes from the Spanish hymnal, Spanish language hymnal, and soon we expanded their hymnal to 100, and we produced a hymnal with notes for them. We also translated our Celtal textbooks into Spanish so that bilingual Toholabals could put them into Toholabal. And one of those textbooks was the church history textbook. After 6 years with the Toholabals, we returned to the Seltals for our final 6 years. They invited us to assist them in the revision of the Highland Seltal Bible. Now, Paul Meyerink had completed the translation of the Old Testament. However, half of it was in the Highland dialect, and half of it was in the Lowland dialect, and both Highlanders and Lowlanders were not content. They wanted a Bible in all complete in their language. So we helped the Highlanders, and Jim Heneveld helped the Lowlanders. With Helen doing the computer keyboarding, we worked with 4 church leaders on the revision. And then suddenly the 40 years were gone, and we returned to Holland, Michigan. And we did return to Chiapas 2 years later for the dedication service of the Highland Seltal Bible. It was held at the Seltal Bible School, and it was an exciting day with a great way to say goodbye.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you what seminary has meant in my history and in the ministry that the Lord has given to me. It didn't start as early as it probably should have, but to really truly understand all of this, I need to kind of start at the beginning. So I get a half hour, right? No, I'm going to have to leave out a lot of details, but it began with when Sharon and I were married. We became involved with a youth group here in Holland in one of the churches, and on one weekend we took the youth to the International Youth of Christ Convention in Indiana, and that proved to be a time that changed our life. The speakers there were challenging us to lay our life on the line for God. I mean, He made us. He knows what we're cut out to be and to do. And just the way it was presented, it just really struck us. You know, they said, if you're not doing what God calls you to do, you're like a square peg in a round hole. You know, I've never forgotten that. But we made a commitment at that point. Lord, we want to do what you want us to do. And so we began, thinking and praying about that. And the thought did cross my mind of, going to seminary. I did enjoy what I was doing, by the way. It was in engineering, mechanical engineering. And that was my training, and that's where I was working. And but the thought, and I'm not saying every time you submit to God you have to become a missionary, a minister. That's not the point. But I began thinking about, what about going to seminary? But then my thought left real quickly because, boy, I'm not sure I could handle that, because the worst class I had in high school was speech class. Man, I died a double death on that to do that. So anyway, I'm not going to get into the details, but it wound up, I did not go to seminary at that point. Dr. Beth Marcus heard that we might be interested in missions, and so she said there is a place in Chiapas, Mexico. Well, that kind of clicked with us. With Sharon, she always felt that the Lord was calling her to be a missionary to Mexico, because she had been working with Mexican workers. She's from Washington State. And it kind of clicked with me, too, because Dr. Kempers, who really started the ministry, was a kind of a distant relative of mine. But anyway, so that kind of clicked to us. And so she said, before you really sign up for this, you got to see what you're going to be getting into, because life is pretty primitive down there. So they flew us down, and we got to fly into different places, MAF, a Missionary Aviation Fellowship, and we were just excited. We were really, this was great. Anyway, we came back and said, you bet, we're ready to go. So we went through the necessary training and then preparation, and so in 1967 we went down to Chiapas and to work with the Hofmans and the Meyrings. But we first spent 3 years in a Tzaltal community, little Christian village, so that we could learn the language. They wanted someone to know the lowland language because they knew the highland language. And so we spent 3 years in a little place where, like Vern mentioned about Carla doing diapers on the rocks. Yeah, Sharon did lots of diapers in a little stream that was there. But anyway, so we were learning the culture and the language of the people. And then we moved to Buenos Aires, where the Bible school had already been established, and joined with the teaching of the people that were there. They came as families. These were leaders, usually deacons or elders from the churches that are scattered around. They would come with their families and spend, hopefully, 3 years there at the Bible school. And so I got involved with teaching there at the Bible school. I had always had a very solid biblical training when I grew up here in Holland. It was Fourth Church at the time. And so I did get involved with teaching at the Bible school, even though I had not gone through seminary. But the thing is that as this was happening, some of those who were graduating from this school, from the Bible school, would go on to be ordained. And well, I helped bring them, at least partly bring them to that point, but I couldn't take part of their ordination. That bothered me. I thought, man, I wish I was ordained, that I could, complete the whole thing. So I thought, yeah, but how in the world are we going to work that out? I don't want to leave 3 years off the field to go to seminary, nor do 1 year at a time every 3 years, So didn't really know how that would work out. Well, but the Lord knows how to do that. I'll get to that in a minute. We were there 10 years and just enjoying it. I mean, living a rich life that God had given us, verifying that when you follow what God has for you, you do live a rich life. It isn't easy. No, I'm not saying that. It's not always easy. But it was a very rich life for us. Well, after about 10 years, I got sick. And it was pretty serious. We flew up to Oklahoma, kind of emergency, if you will, and stayed there for 3 months trying to figure out what was going on. Well, long and short of it is that I had Crohn's disease, and the doctor in Oklahoma wanted me checked out to make sure of this. So he sent me to Mayo Clinic as well, just to verify all of this. And the doctor in Mayo Clinic said, "You will not be able to return to Chiapas." And that was a hard one to accept. Why? Why, Lord? That doesn't make sense. I mean, there we are, working in Chiapas. There aren't that many who want to become a missionary in the first place, and we are thoroughly enjoying it. I mean, we know the language and the culture, and we're running, Why take us off the field now? And I need to be honest, the Lord and I had a few discussions over that one. Well, I've got to hurry up. Okay. Boy, that time goes fast. Okay. Anyway, so we had to put up with that. Well, after 9 months of gaining my strength and all of that, I did come to seminary. And spent about 3 great years here. We had 4 kids. And then in my senior year, Dr. Osterhaven called me in his office and he said, I have a place I think is great for you. And he mentioned Bell Tower Reformed Church up in Ellsworth, Michigan, which is up near Charlevoix. Well, we went up there and tried it out and fell in love. We wound up spending 12 years there with great people, just loved it. Well, after 12 years, we were still going, and the Lord opened up the door for us to be able to go back to Chiapas. Well, we did go back for 13 more years, in spite of my thing, and this is where the seminary really comes in. The church down there asked, would you help us to translate the whole Bible? They had the New Testament by Wycliffe, but it had been a number of years ago, and they just said, we want to do it all new, but they didn't have the Old Testament. And, well, that scared me. But I did work with 3 Salto pastors for 11 years, and we translated the whole Bible in the lowland dialect. And this is the picture of our dedication of it, and there were a couple thousand people that came for that dedication, and then a year later, we retired. It was close to my retirement time, and so we came back in 2007. Okay, I think I better quit. Janelle, you got it.
It's not quite fair to go after all of that because I'm already worked up and a little bit emotional. Hello, my name is Janelle López-Koolhaas, and I am honored to be sharing alongside so many of my mentors and teachers and folks who spoke into my life in pivotal times and ways. I graduated from Western Seminary in 2001, and as I look around, I'm thankful for the other familiar faces I see from that time period as well. I grew up as a preacher's kid near Vancouver, Canada, at a small church plant, and I caught the missionary bug early. Before I had graduated from high school, I knew what my life had to be. I had to become a missionary, and I was so excited. I went to Northwestern College in Orange City, Iowa for school, not really caring what I would major in as long as it would get me to the mission field. And I sought out memoirs and classes and mentors who would help lead me in that direction, one of whom was Dr. Raymond Weiss, who was a Western Seminary graduate, I think of 1954, who spent time in Bahrain in the Middle East as a pastor and teacher, and we heard about Bahrain's legacy already this morning. I graduated from college desiring and feeling ready to go into the world and to make disciples. I was wide-eyed, very ambitious, good at languages, idealistically willing to be poor and single if it would be necessary, and I was ready to go wherever God would send me. And y'all, I was all of 21 years old. Thankfully, there were wise voices across my life who affirmed my missionary call, but pointed out that I should get some more preparation. So what kind of missionary could I be? I knew I was not going to make it as a nurse or a doctor, the likes of Ida Scudder or Arlene Scheidemann. I liked the idea of teaching, but I had tried my hand at ESL, and frankly, I liked being the one learning the new language more than teaching my own. I had a hot-off-the-press religion degree, and a missionary that I had interned with during college had challenged me that the growing church in the world would need leadership formation, biblical and theological training to raise up indigenous pastors. This intrigued me. I devoured theology and Bible classes, and I could see myself training to in turn train pastors, even if I could never see myself interested or encouraged to be one myself. And that was how I ended up at Western in the fall of 1998. The seminary had been working hard to renew its intentionality at shaping pastors and church leaders to integrate a missional vision into their own ministries, wherever and however they would be called. My coursework in biblical languages and Reformed theology and history was taken alongside missiology, cross-cultural mission and evangelism. In my youth and idealism, I didn't always feel like they spoke to each other in harmony, and I wrestled with that. But my big lesson then, and still today learning, is to trust the foundation, to be firmly rooted in all of the faithful ways the gospel has come to us and to me, and to be a voice and a life ready to translate it freshly, and especially also to hear it freshly embodied and transformative in the lives of other believers from other contexts. One crucial way that Western was intentional about making space for this kind of learning and new experiences was through the intercultural immersion trips that were required and still are as part of one's degree work. Students would spend 2 weeks in another country or context to listen, absorb, and learn what God was doing in other places, including Chiapas, Mexico. Thank you, Vern and Carla. And the rest of you, too, who we would meet along the way. I recall vividly on that trip with my fellow classmates, one dear classmate and good friend saying to me how important this tour of the Bible school was, that this trip was meaningful to him, who would become a pastor in the RCA, to connect him to real stories and people in the greater Church of God, and to the missionaries, like I hope to be, with whom it would be his role to support and preach alongside and learn from with a shared vision. In fact, I continue Western Seminary to meet pastor colleagues who recount that their cross-cultural immersion trip and exploring mission and global Christianity was the most transformative memory that they have of seminary. And I applaud Western for making this priority central to how her students continue to be formed. While I was attending Western, I was granted a scholarship, much like some of the others have described, to go to Chiapas and spend a time of immersion and learning along with present missionaries and discerning my own vocation. On the screen, you may see a picture of me during that summer. During that summer, I had a deeply inspiring experience of observing the work that we've been hearing about already this morning and attempting to imagine myself there and in the midst of it. As it happens, I'm kind of handy with a pen and a sketchbook, and the photo here shows a group of translators and I looking over traditional Saltal textiles, which I would get to interpret in pen and ink to design the Bible cover of the soon-to-be-published Oshchuk Tenihapa Bible edition. By the end of that summer, the question in the air was getting louder with the Hofman's pending retirement. Would there be an open spot on the Chiapas team for another teacher and translation worker for the Highland Saltals? And before I flew home, a small group of pastors that you have seen asked me to pray about coming back when I graduated in 2 years. And by the time they had asked the question, my heart, God had already warmed my heart to knowing that I would say yes to that call. I agreed. In 2001, I would graduate with my MDiv from Western, be ordained, which is a story in and of itself for another time, finish support raising with churches and have a commissioning from the General Synod, reduce my belongings to a few pieces of luggage, and then go. I arrived in Chiapas in 2001 very much aware of the Saltal's revision of the Bible that was newly finished and currently sent to press. And I was also assured and assumed that there would be much material in need of translating and for teaching for Saltal pastors and leaders. What I didn't know was what God was doing in the meantime. The translation team that had been formed was continuing to deftly and promptly work on translations of their Book of Church Order and Sunday School and catechism materials, even in the months before I arrived, and I walked in on one of their meetings on my very first day at the Bible school. and local indigenous Saltal teachers were covering the classes at the school, all of whom were first language speakers and respected members of their community. So after my first 6 months of language school in Spanish and a homestay with a Saltal lady, it was decided by the local presbytery that I should begin teaching immediately in the next semester, rather than taking the time to learn Saltal in a village stay like all of the other missionaries have described. That was a crucial shift of plans. It continued my realization that the landscape was changing. The generation of students I would be assigned to work with all knew enough Spanish for us to communicate, though not without some ridiculous gaffes along the way. So I started teaching, but this was also a time of incredible learning as well. I was awed and humbled as I got to know my students and their worldview and how it challenged mine and showed me how the gospel translates into ways that I had not even yet begun to imagine. Among the young people that I met that summer, not one of my own students, was a wonderful and remarkable person named Janelle López, who would become to be my husband. We met during a conference for young Chiapanecos believers who were being equipped and praying together about how they might be called to be sent by their churches into the world to continue the work of the gospel. As a few semesters went by, I continued to sense the wind changing, and pastors and leaders in the Saltal community were ready and eager to lead their own way. They were no longer going to look for the same kind of companionship and service from outside brothers and sisters, at least not the way that they once had. And sooner than I could have imagined, God called me away from serving the church in Chiapas. But this brings me back to some gratitude for Western, because in the process of my training, of our training, we also learned about what it meant to give oneself to ministry, to Christ-like humility, to decentering of oneself, and to pointing of how God is building his church. There was always meant to be a time when missionary partnership with the local church reached completion and fulfillment, and when the landscape would change. And I celebrate how much prayer by churches, how much partnership and how much kingdom work was bearing real and mature fruit and nourishing generations of believers as it has, and how it has inspired our churches as well. Gloria al Señor. Amen. I am also thankful to Western for how it shaped me for ministry, because God would go on to call me to be a pastor, which I never thought I could or should be. And now I give thanks to God that along with my husband, Angel, we get to serve at Third Reformed Church in a kind of reverse mission scenario where we are working with people God is sending from around the world to Holland, Michigan, who are asylum seekers and immigrants, and we are blessed to be their pastors and to learn from them. Can you see God's hand at work? Can you see how God has plans that we cannot imagine? Next month, my husband, Angel, will lead an intercultural immersion trip of Western Seminary students to the border of Mexico and the US, where he now serves as a global mission partner through the RCA. And I am dazzled at what God has done and what he will continue to do. In the name of Jesus, amen.
You're probably wondering what I'm doing up here, but I have a connection to Chiapas, which I prize. In 1997, a couple of years after I became president, the faculty decided that the intercultural immersion experiences would be good for our students. I think George Hunsberger, I don't know how many of you were involved in that, but that happened about the time I became president. And a couple years later, I took my first trip to Chiapas. It wasn't under the auspices of the seminary or the Chiapan missionaries, but a group in Minnesota that did intercultural immersion and set it up for us. Well, it didn't make a lot of sense once I went down there and became reacquainted with Vern Sterk, who had been a couple of years ahead of me at Western Seminary, and I played basketball with him on a tour that President Ritter sent us on to Iowa to play the JV teams of Central College and Northwestern College. Anyway, there you see, he was good, and I wasn't. But I went along to help pray on these trips. But and a lot of crazy things happened on these trips too, by the way. But that's not the point. The point is that I became reacquainted with Vern, decided that the seminary should work through our missionaries in Chiapas to set up intercultural immersion experiences. So from that time on, we did that. We worked through the missionaries in Chiapas. And I did 9 times and loved every one of them, because what I enjoyed was the interaction with our students, I think most of all, because you get to know people when you are sitting around at hotels or when you're at Palenque going up those wonderful Mayan ruins or whatever. So that I became very much involved in the seminary's intercultural immersion experiences to Chiapas. And there I met the missionaries, I met people that would be friends. On Hall and Janelle is a story, that's a story in itself. I remember serenaders coming to the mission house in San Cristobal to serenade Janelle, sent there by, I'm sure, by Angel. And it woke me up. I mean, it was pretty loud. But there were a lot of wonderful experiences and a lot of relationships developed and maintained because of these intercultural immersion experiences. And then they broadened, and we had intercultural immersion experiences established in other places, like Hungary and Oman, where I went three times with our students, and Kenya, and a variety of places, the border between Mexico and the United States, which became a very important learning experience. We even had them to Los Angeles, which was truly intercultural immersion as well. So I just wanted to link that together with our intercultural immersion experiences and say how much I appreciated the opportunity to participate in those. And I found this on my shelf at my office a few weeks ago. I had forgotten. I don't even know where it came from. It has no name on it, but it says 1997 Chiapas. And it's filled with pictures of those who were on that trip and those that we met on the trip. So if you are one that made this, I don't know why you didn't put your name on it, because I'm sure it was something that you would be proud of, but it's filled with pictures. So and I know Vern and Carla asked if I had pictures, and I didn't know about this at that time. I could have included some of these in the slide presentation. But I wanted to say how much I have gained from the intercultural immersion experiences that we started here and from the missionaries where we visited, either in Chiapas or Oman or many other places. Working together with the RC in this way has been beneficial to the seminary, but also to the Reformed Church in America. So thank you for your support and for the opportunity to do what we've been able to do. Thank you very much.
Well, friends, thank you so much for your faithful service for the Church of God, for your sacrificial love and care for the Tzotzil people, and your incredible ministry in Chiapas, Mexico. Friends, will you join me once again in expressing our appreciation for our graduates? I before I turn it over to Andy for a benediction and some instructions, I do have just one quick announcement. You may remember when Vern was presenting, you might have seen the name John and Mabel Kempers go up on the screen. They were the founders of the Reformed Church in America mission in Chiapas. And so Chuck, I didn't see where, Chuck, right there, hiding in the back. So Chuck has he has 10 copies of the book. It's free, but he is charging a $5 shipping and handling fee. So if you would like a copy of this book, please see Chuck sitting in the back. Friends, thank you so much for being here. Each of you are supporters and prayers and friends of the seminary, and truly, who we are today is because of the faithfulness of God's people through the years. All that we do, the legacy that we enjoy, the things that we are doing, they are not done, they are not created out of thin air, but truly who we are today, we are standing on faithful men and women of God who have served the Lord, loved the church, and have given of themselves sacrificially for the kingdom of God. And you have been a part of that. Your prayers, your support, your encouragement, your friendship, your good witness for Western Theological Seminary have enabled us to continue to form women and men for faithful Christian ministry. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Let me invite Andy Bass to come and give us some instructions and also give the benediction.
Well, my heart is full. I don't know if yours is as well, but several times I teared up just thinking of this legacy and what God has done. One quick announcement. If you have signed up for the President's Club Zwemer Society lunch, we are going to be meeting next door in the Commons. If you did not sign up or are not a part of the President's Club or Zwemer Society, I would love to talk to you. You can talk to me right afterwards. We'll find a place for you. But for now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and lift up his countenance and bring you peace. And now would you go to love and serve the Lord? Amen.